My name is Nora, and this is the story of the moment I finally understood that I had never truly been a part of my own family. I had arrived at my younger sister Lila's wedding with no intention of causing any ripples, just to be present, to offer smiles for the camera, and to play the familiar role of the polite, supportive older sister. The celebration took place at an elegant lakeside resort in Vermont, a venue renowned for its vibrant gardens bursting with flowers and opulent banquet halls crowned by towering glass ceilings. As my car pulled up to the grand entrance, a staff member dressed sharply in a black suit opened the door for me. I inhaled slowly, smoothed the folds of my deep wine-colored dress, the only one I felt matched the occasion's formality, and stepped out with a soft smile. I wasn't trying to stand out or shift the spotlight in my direction. This day was meant for Lila, and I had made peace long ago with the fact that I was never the favorite child. What I hadn't braced for, though, was the depth of their indifference. The moment I entered the main hall, I was greeted by a receptionist who flashed a practiced, gleaming smile. "May I have your name, please?" she asked politely. "Nora Blake," I replied, keeping my voice gentle. Her expression froze for a fraction of a second. I noticed a flicker of uncertainty pass across her heavily made-up face as she thumbed through the guest list with increased urgency. Eventually, her fingers paused. Her gaze shifted slightly before she looked up again. "Yes, here you are. You've been assigned to a seat in the hallway area." I blinked, confused. "I'm sorry, where exactly?" I asked. Her tone remained breezy, but it had a rehearsed edge. "Just outside the main banquet room, near the coat check." My eyes drifted toward the seating chart posted nearby. My parents, listed as Mr. and Mrs. Blake, had prominent seats at the head table. Lila's inner circle, her best friends, her new in-laws, her husband's colleagues, all sat comfortably under the glow of the crystal chandeliers inside. But my name wasn't anywhere visible in that lavish space. "I think there's been some kind of mistake," I said, trying to stay composed. "I don't see my name listed inside." Her smile reappeared, though this time it felt strained and uneasy. "Unfortunately, this is the confirmed seating arrangement." A sharp sting tightened in my chest. I tried to convince myself it was a last-minute oversight, maybe a logistical misstep. But then I caught sight of my mother, Margaret, standing by Lila, helping to fix the bridal veil. Both of them were laughing, clinging to each other as if everything was perfect. I approached quietly, keeping my tone even. "Mom, could I have a quick word with you?" She didn't turn. "Nora, not now. Can't you see we're in the middle of something important?" She replied, brushing me off. I swallowed my frustration. "It'll only take a moment." With an audible groan, she stepped away. Lila remained by the mirror, watching me with a smile that looked more like smug satisfaction than warmth. "I've been seated in the hallway," I told our mother. Margaret shrugged without the slightest hint of surprise or concern. "We had to prioritize the immediate family. You understand, don't you?" My fists clenched instinctively. "But I am immediate family." She let out a soft, dismissive laugh that cut deeper than any shout. "Don't make this into something it's not, Nora." Lila joined in with a saccharine tone, her eyes glinting. "It was probably just a small oversight. These things happen. Weddings are chaotic." Her words sounded gentle, but her expression betrayed the real sentiment. This wasn't an accident. Turning back to my mother, I searched her face for any sign of guilt or second-guessing, but all I saw was irritation. "Don't create unnecessary drama, Nora. You should just be glad we included you at all." That word, glad, lodged in my throat like a jagged pebble. I was expected to feel fortunate for being treated like a background extra in my own family's event. Before I could form a reply, my father Charles appeared beside us. His tone was quiet and low, as though he hoped to quickly diffuse the moment. "It's only a chair, honey. Don't let it ruin anything." I didn't move. The resentment didn't flare loudly, it didn't have to. It simmered cold and slow, building silently. I gave him a vacant smile and turned away. They assumed I would swallow the insult like I always had. But this time I wouldn't. With measured steps, I walked out of the hall. My heels echoed faintly against the sleek marble floor. The air in the hallway carried the scent of roses, satin, and something else, something misaligned, just like me. In my hand, I still held the delicate place card. "Nora Blake, Table H, hallway area." The elegant handwriting felt more like a quiet humiliation than a formality. As I turned the card between my fingers, my palm growing clammy, I felt the last remnants of hope dissolve. I had come wishing, maybe just this once, to be acknowledged as part of the family. But it was clear that hope had no place here. A gentle click broke the silence. The banquet hall door opened behind me. "Nora," Lila called out, her voice light, cheerful, almost casual. I turned. She stood with arms folded, veil catching the draft, her posture polished and her appearance pristine. But her smile held no kindness. "Is this about your seat?" she asked, with a tone far too relaxed for someone who truly cared. I let out a short, humorless laugh. "No. I'm not angry. I'm disappointed." Lila tilted her head and gave a look that suggested she found my feelings amusing. "You're always like this. It's just a chair, Nora. No one cares." I bit the inside of my cheek, making sure my voice didn't crack. "This isn't about a chair. It's about how I've always been treated. It never changes." She smirked. "Yet you're still here. Still hoping they'll finally notice you. Still dressing up, still pretending." Lila stepped closer, lowering her voice so no one else could hear. "You're always chasing approval. It's honestly kind of pathetic." I held her gaze. "No, Lila. What's really pathetic is that you need to hurt someone else to feel important." She blinked, thrown off for just a beat, but recovered quickly with a short laugh. "You really do know how to kill a moment." Footsteps sounded behind her. Our mother appeared again, Margaret, her expression tense like she'd been pulled from something more enjoyable to deal with an inconvenient distraction. "I heard something was going on out here," she said, eyes briefly flicking toward me but settling firmly on Lila. I inhaled slowly, needing to speak my truth. "Mom, they sat me in the hallway. I'm not a stranger. I'm your daughter." She furrowed her brow, then plastered on a tight, rehearsed smile. "Nora, it's not that you aren't valued. There just weren't enough seats. We had to give priority to people who are," she paused, correcting herself, "who are closer." Aunt Patty, Mom's college best friend, was there. So were the neighbors who had supported Lila through her illness. The guest list was carefully curated, handpicked to surround Lila with people who had mattered to her journey. And then there was me, Nora, the one who had always been fine on her own. My mother's voice was steady, casual even. "You've always been independent. I never had to worry about you." A soft laugh escaped me, one so quiet it even caught me off guard. "You never had to worry," I echoed under my breath, "and that somehow makes it okay to treat me like I'm invisible?" Lila stepped in quickly, her tone coated in artificial sweetness. "Nora, don't be like this. Mom didn't mean anything by it. You're just blowing things out of proportion. Honestly, you should be thankful you were invited at all." Those words cut deeper than anything else that day. I slowly turned to face my mother, and for the first time I truly saw her, not as the parent I'd longed to impress, but as the woman who had never really seen me at all. "Do you have any idea how cruel it sounds to ask me to be grateful while making me feel like a stranger in my own family?" She remained silent. No explanation, no hug, not even a trace of remorse. Then I heard a familiar voice from nearby, deeper, more detached. "It's only a seat, Nora." It was my father, Gregory, standing just off to the side with a drink in hand, his eyes fixed on the carpet as if hoping the moment would resolve itself without his involvement. I turned to face him directly, choosing every word carefully. "I don't need you to stand up for me. But the least you could do is look me in the eye when you speak." He lifted his gaze, a flicker of confusion dancing there for a moment before it disappeared. Lila, exasperated now, rolled her eyes like I was an unruly child disturbing the grown-ups gathering. "If you're that upset, then maybe you should just go." I looked at them. 3 people bound to me by blood, people I had once called family, and for the first time I wondered if maybe Lila was right. I wrapped my fingers around my purse strap and took a deep breath. There was no anger, no heartbreak this time, just a cold, quiet understanding. They had made the decision long ago that I didn't belong. And I would no longer beg for a place. Whatever came next would make sure this night stayed etched in their memories for a long time. My footsteps carried me down the long, carpeted corridor, swallowed by the plush silence beneath my heels. Behind me, laughter rang out from the banquet hall, clinking glasses, the soundtrack of celebration. But none of it felt real to me anymore. It might as well have been coming from a world I'd never been welcome in. I found a quiet corner where the light dimmed slightly and the air felt a little cooler. I stopped there, clutching my purse like it was the only thing tying me to the moment. Images flooded my mind, Lila's triumphant smirk, Mom's indifferent expression, Dad's tired silence, all playing like a broken loop in my head. Then a memory surfaced, sharp and uninvited. 3 years earlier I had returned home for Thanksgiving. Lila had been away, off adventuring through Portugal with yet another boyfriend. The house in Albany felt strangely peaceful in her absence, no overpowering perfume, no dominating presence. Mom had asked me to go upstairs and look through my old room for some photographs to use in a memory album. I agreed, somewhat relieved to be given something that felt like participation. Everything in the room was just as I had left it, The narrow bed by the window, the aging bookshelf, photos from high school, most of them just of me. As I searched a drawer, I found the photo box. But then my eyes drifted to the small drawer in my mother's vanity, half concealed. Something urged me to open it. Inside, a light brown leather-bound notebook rested quietly. The pages were filled with my mother's handwriting, neat, consistent, full of care. I flipped it open absent-mindedly, but the first line grabbed my attention instantly. The first day Lila went to kindergarten, she didn't cry. She turned around, smiled, and walked in like a brave little doll. I turned to the next page. Lila loves my baked pasta on Thursdays. Another page, she used to be scared of thunderstorms, but she's much stronger now. And another, her favorite birthday gift was the nurse costume I gave her when she turned 8. Every single entry was about Lila. Year after year, emotion after emotion, a chronicle of her childhood told like a personal tribute. My breath quickened as I flipped through the pages faster, searching for even one sentence that mentioned me. There wasn't a single word. Not one line. Not even my name. My hands trembled as I held the journal, my grip so tight my knuckles whitened. I was still sitting on the floor when Mom walked in. Her eyes fell on the notebook, open in my lap. "You wrote all of this, just about Lila?" I asked, my voice cold and distant. She glanced at the book and gave a casual smile, one that stung far more than any insult. I needed to remember those things. Lila's sensitive. She needed to feel seen. I bit my lip so hard it drew blood. "And what about me?" She looked at me without flinching. "You've always been the strong one. You didn't need words written down to be remembered." I said nothing else. I simply nodded. But something inside me broke, quietly, permanently. Not just the illusion of being included, but something deeper, something tied to the hope that maybe one day I would be chosen, remembered, acknowledged. Standing in that grand hallway today, all of it came rushing back like a bitter wind. Nothing had changed. I was still Nora, the daughter my mother had never once written about, the woman now left standing by the coat rack at her sister's wedding. A shiver traced down my spine, not from the temperature, but from the truth settling in my bones. I lowered myself onto the bench near the window, positioned precisely next to the coat rack, the exact place they had assigned me. In one hand I held the name card, its letters printed in ornate gold script. In the reflection on the window pane, I saw my own faint outline, just another blurry figure outside the glow of celebration. Behind me, the wedding carried on glimmering lights, cascades of white flowers, Lila's radiant smile, and that lavish dress shimmering beneath the chandeliers. But I sat outside that world, on the edge of remembrance, space, and belonging. If this was where they believed I fit, then perhaps they had never truly seen me at all. And strangely, for the first time, I didn't feel sadness over that realization. Instead, I felt as if I had finally begun to emerge from the long shadow they had kept me in. I was no longer hidden, I was awake, aware, and ready to confront it all. I remained seated by the glass, my heart torn between old memories and what had just taken place. Every moment repeated in my head, Lila's smug voice, my mother's cold indifference, and my father's quiet withdrawal. Their words looped endlessly in my thoughts, relentless and uninvited. "Nora." A voice, low and male, startled me out of the spiral. I looked up. Standing in front of me was Caleb Morgan, the groom. His tuxedo was impeccable, though his tie hung slightly loosened, and his tousled dark brown hair suggested he'd been running a stressed hand through it all evening. A champagne flute hung loosely in one hand. I rose to my feet, smoothed the fabric of my dress, and gave a faint nod. "Caleb." He studied me closely, his brow narrowing slightly like he was trying to decipher something he hadn't expected to find. "Seeing you out here like this, it just doesn't feel right." A dry, humorless laugh slipped from my lips. "Well, that's what happens when your family decides you're not worth a place at their table." He didn't reply. The silence that followed was heavy but not uncomfortable, more like an unspoken truce between two people who had barely exchanged words before but suddenly found themselves in something real. "Nora," Caleb said quietly after a moment. "Can I ask you something?" I met his gaze evenly. "Of course." He hesitated, his fingers tightening slightly around the delicate stem of the glass. "Has Lila ever said anything about me, anything that seemed wrong?" I tilted my head slightly. "You mean, have I ever heard her speak poorly of you?" "It's more than that," he admitted, reaching into his inner jacket pocket and pulling out his phone. "Lately, she's been different. Controlling. Withholding. There are things she's kept from me, and I can't ignore it anymore. I think something's going on, and I'm starting to see it clearly." Lila's past words drifted back to me, harsh comments made when she thought no one would repeat them. Until now I had always kept quiet. I didn't want drama and I had grown too used to being overlooked. But looking into Caleb's troubled expression, I couldn't stay silent anymore. You might want to brace yourself, I said slowly. Because the woman you think you married, she's not exactly who she pretends to be. He opened his mouth to respond, but another voice broke in, soft but unmistakably firm. And if you're still uncertain, perhaps your mother can help clarify a few things. Both of us turned toward the sound. Vivian Morgan, Caleb's mother, stood at the end of the hallway. She held a phone in one hand, her gaze locked onto her son. Vivian had the kind of commanding presence that didn't need volume to be noticed. She was dressed in a midnight blue gown, her platinum blonde hair pulled into a sleek bun, and her sharp eyes seemed to slice through pretense with ease. As she stepped closer, she handed the phone to Caleb. Take a look. He accepted it and began swiping through the screen. I watched as his expression changed, first confusion, then disbelief, followed by anger and something deeper. His hand trembled slightly as he read. She told her best friend that she's molding me into the perfect husband, he murmured. Said I'm predictable, and that if she keeps up the sweet act around you, the house would be hers. Vivian nodded, her voice calm. There are also messages between her and her stylist. Lila said, and I quote, that once a few months pass after the wedding, she'll make sure you become dependent. And then everything will be mine. Those were her words. I glanced at Caleb. He had gone pale, shoulders rigid as though carrying something too heavy to comprehend. I don't understand, he whispered. Mom, how do you even have these? Vivian met his eyes without flinching. The stylist works at a studio I've used. When I rescheduled a fitting, someone accidentally forwarded the backup files to my email. I opened them without knowing what they contained. Caleb slumped into a nearby chair, still holding the phone tightly. The hallway seemed to still. I sat beside him in silence. A part of me ached for him. But another part, one long ignored, recognized this moment as one where long-hidden truths finally broke through the surface. Vivian remained standing, her hand resting gently on Caleb's shoulder, offering support without words. After a few quiet seconds, she looked at me. Nora, she said softly, thank you for not looking away. I nodded. I wasn't looking for praise. I just wanted the truth to be seen for once. And whatever this wedding had been meant to celebrate, it was no longer going to unfold the way Lila had envisioned. Her illusion of control was slipping. The atmosphere shifted as we entered the private conference room on the second floor of the resort. The air was thick with tension and no one spoke as the door clicked shut behind us. The only sound came from the soft hum of the air conditioner and the occasional stir of wind slipping in through a cracked window. Caleb sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. Vivian stood quietly behind him, one hand on his shoulder like an anchor. I took a seat just off to the side, keeping my hands folded tightly in my lap, even though my heartbeat thudded in my ears with a force I couldn't hide. Then the door opened again. Lila walked in, my mother Margaret following close behind. My mother's eyes scanned the room, puzzled. Lila, however, was different. She still carried that veneer of confidence, but it was thinner now, cracked at the edges. There was worry in her gaze and a trace of fear that hadn't been there before. What's going on? She asked, her voice pitched just a bit too high. Why are you pulling people away from the wedding? Caleb rose from his chair. His expression was no longer clouded by confusion. It had sharpened into something calm, firm, and unwavering. Slowly, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a white envelope. He placed it on the table with steady hands, his eyes locked on hers. Do you even know what this is? Caleb's tone remained calm, but there was no softness left in it. Lila's eyes flicked to the envelope, but she didn't answer. It's a petition to annul the marriage, he continued, his voice even but resolute. And in case you're wondering, I've already signed it. A stunned hush fell across the room. My mother let out a small gasp, her hand instinctively covering her mouth. Lila stepped backward, her lips pressed together in a thin, rigid line. You're joking, she said, her voice higher now, stretched thin with disbelief. Tell me this is a joke. Vivian didn't wait. Her words cut straight through the air. We've read every message, Lila. Everything you've said, about Caleb, about me, about this entire family. There's no denying it now. Lila began, but Caleb didn't let her finish. Don't, he said, his voice now laced with pain and fury. You called my mother a rich old woman who only exists to sign checks. You told your friend you'd have full control 6 months after the wedding. You described me as someone easy to manipulate. As long as you acted delicate, you could get anything you wanted. He took a sharp breath. Shall I keep quoting, or is that enough? Lila stood frozen. I turned to look at my mother. She was pale, staring at her daughter like she was seeing her for the very first time and not liking what she saw. They were jokes, Lila said, her voice faltering. Just silly messages between friends. None of it was serious. Vivian let out a sharp, humorless laugh. And the divorce consultation you filed last month? Was that just another joke? That's when the door opened again, and my father, Walter, entered. His presence shifted the air in the room, grounding it in something heavier. I wasn't sure who had called him, but the timing wasn't lost on any of us. Is this true? He asked, his eyes fixed firmly on Lila. She didn't respond. Walter's gaze shifted to my mother. Did you know? My mother shook her head slowly as if she was struggling to catch up. I didn't think Lila would ever. You never think, he said, each word deliberate. You've never really seen what's going on right in front of you. Then something unexpected happened. He turned toward me. For the first time in many years, he didn't look away. Nora, he said, his voice lower now, I'm sorry. Both my mother and I were momentarily stunned. Apologies had never come from him, not to me. Not once. I've stayed silent too long, he went on. Let everything drift to a place it shouldn't have gone. And you were right about Lila, about everything. I didn't know how to respond. I'd spent so long being invisible that finally being acknowledged left me completely still. Lila broke the silence. You're siding with her? She yelled, voice climbing in desperation. The daughter you've always ignored is turning you all against me over a few texts? Caleb gripped the edge of the table, his jaw tight. Don't downplay it, Lila. Those weren't just words. That's who you really are. You don't understand. Lila shouted. Her voice cracked with emotion. I love you. I only wanted a stable future. Is that such a terrible thing? Vivian raised a brow, her voice calm but unforgiving. Is that what love looks like to you? Planning to leave your husband before the ink on the marriage certificate is dry. She's lying. Lila shrieked, spinning toward me, her eyes filled with fire. This is your fault. You've always been jealous. You poisoned Mom against me. You ruined everything. I took a slow breath and kept my tone level. No, Lila. You did this. Not me. You've always made your own choices. This is the result. You've always been the outsider, she screamed. You pretend to be so good just to make Mom feel guilty. What do you want? My life? Everything I built. I shook my head, voice quiet but unwavering. I just want the truth to come out. My mother took a hesitant step forward, looking at Lila for a long time. There was confusion in her eyes, followed by pain, and finally something that resembled realization. Lila, she said softly, her voice trembling, I can't defend you anymore. Lila stood there motionless. Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but no words came. She turned her gaze to me, and for the first time, I didn't see anger or arrogance. I saw fear, not the fear of exposure, but the fear of knowing she stood alone. Her breathing grew heavier, fists clenched tightly by her sides. Her once flawless makeup had begun to smudge, streaking beneath her eyes. The dress that once made her the center of admiration now looked stiff, constraining, no longer the symbol of her fairy tale, but the uniform of a performance unraveling. She whipped her head toward me again, eyes dark and wild. You always wanted to destroy me, she hissed. You never let me live in peace, not once. I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. But she didn't need my words to feel the weight of the moment. Then suddenly she lunged at her footsteps sharp against the polished tile floor. But before she could reach me, a steady arm blocked her path. It was Vivian. That's enough, she said, her voice soft but firm as steel. Lila froze mid-step, blinking as if she had just been yanked back to reality. Move, Lila snapped. You've done enough damage. Vivian didn't flinch. If I let you do one more reckless thing, that would be on me. Lila's chest rose and fell rapidly. Her eyes darted across the room, scanning each face. She searched for someone, anyone who might still be in her corner. But there was no one. Caleb leaned against the table, unreadable. My father stood with his head slightly bowed, the weight of truth pressing on his shoulders. And my mother, once the protector of every one of Lila's lies, stood frozen, clutching her purse strap with red-rimmed eyes. Then, without another word, Lila pushed past Vivian. Her heels clacked against the hard floor as she stormed from the room, the long train of her once pristine gown trailing behind like a shadow. I thought she would disappear quietly, slipping away behind the nearest door. But she didn't. Instead, she burst through the main entrance to the reception hall. The music was still playing softly, laughter and conversation still alive. Guests sipped champagne, posed for photos, and admired the floral displays. Until she entered. Disheveled hair, smeared makeup, wild eyes. And just like that, everything stopped. The music faltered. Heads turned. Whispers spread like sparks, confused, surprised, and then stunned. We followed from the conference room, trailing silently behind her. No one tried to intervene. No one wanted to. Lila stood at the heart of the celebration. Once meant to be the radiant bride, she now looked more like a dethroned queen. Her own downfall lay bare in front of every guest. "You think you can humiliate me like this?" she screamed, her voice bouncing off the walls and chandeliers. "I poured everything into today. Every detail. Every second. And over a few stupid messages, you're just going to tear it all apart? You're going to destroy me." No one spoke. Caleb took a step forward, his eyes fixed and steady. "You weren't destroyed by anyone else, Lila," he said quietly but firmly. "You did this to yourself." She shook her head in disbelief, tears streaking down her cheeks. "You love me, Caleb. I did everything for our future." Vivian stepped closer, her movements slow and deliberate. When she faced Lila, her voice was calm, almost eerily so. "There was a time when I hoped you'd truly become a part of this family," she said. "But the truth is, you never wanted to be a Morgan. You only wanted what being a Morgan could give you." A hushed gasp moved through the crowd like a soft ripple breaking the surface of water. Some guests began exchanging glances. A few quietly placed their glasses down, their expressions shifting from celebratory to grim with understanding. Lila's breath came in shallow bursts as she looked around the room. "She made all of this up," she shouted, pointing directly at me. "Nora has always been jealous. She spent her whole life in the shadows, and now she wants to drag me down too." I stepped forward slowly, calm and composed. My voice didn't need to be loud, it just needed to land. "I'm not dragging anyone anywhere," I said. "The truth is heavy enough to stand on its own." For a moment, Lila said nothing. The tension in the air was razor sharp. As that once admired her were now filled with silence, doubt, and distance. Even those who had once rallied behind her stood motionless. She turned desperately to Caleb. "You can't walk away from me," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm your wife. We made vows." Caleb reached into his jacket and pulled out the same envelope he had revealed earlier. He held it up without hesitation. "This is the annulment agreement," he said, each word measured. "And I've already signed it." The entire reception hall seemed to hold its breath. Vivian placed a gentle hand on her son's shoulder. "Let's go, Caleb," she said softly. Together they turned and walked away, their footsteps deliberate and final. Lila remained standing alone beneath the glow of chandeliers and the shimmer of expensive gowns. Once the center of every conversation, every detail, every decision, she was now a silhouette surrounded by the ruins of her own ambition. 1 week after the wedding, I woke up in my modest apartment in Boston. There were no flowers. No violin music drifting in from another room. No awkward small talk or judgmental glances waiting for me. Just the quiet hum of morning and my own breathing. My phone buzzed gently on the nightstand. The screen lit up. It was my mother again, the 9th call in 3 days. I didn't pick up. I had already heard all I needed to. From that conference room. From that reception hall. From a lifetime spent watching them choose someone else. I didn't need another forced apology. I didn't need a hug for show. And I didn't need to be part of their performance anymore. Later that afternoon, while brewing coffee, a new message appeared. It was from Mom. "I know you're angry. I can't fix the past, but I want to see you. Just the two of us. Dinner." I stared at the text for a long while. The version of me from a few years back would have replied right away. Chosen a nice outfit. Arrived 5 minutes early. Smiled through the discomfort. Tried to steer the conversation somewhere safe. And deep down, I would have hoped she might finally say, "I'm proud of you." Or maybe just call me by my name with sincerity. But that version of me didn't exist anymore. I put the phone down. No reply. No bitterness. Just a quiet, firm decision that I didn't need it. That evening, I took a walk along the Charles River. Warm lights hung from the railings and flickered across the surface of the still water. The crisp autumn air carried laughter from strangers and the rustle of leaves. I sat on a stone bench and pulled out an old photo I kept tucked inside my wallet. It was Christmas. I had just turned 16. Lila stood in the center, glowing in a bright red dress, beaming like she owned the world. Mom sat proudly beside her, one hand on her shoulder. I was there too, but barely in the background, half blocked by the tree. I stared at that photo for a while, then quietly folded it and placed it back in my bag. I no longer felt the need to force myself into a family portrait I was never meant to be part of. Another call came in. This time it was my father, Walter. I answered not because I wanted to, but because I knew he wouldn't call unless he meant it. Nora, he said, his voice rough and slower than I remembered. I've never been good with words. You know that. I stayed quiet. Just listened. But that day, when you spoke up and your mother saw Lila for who she really is, I think for the first time in her life, she understood how alone you've been. A long silence followed. Whether or not you forgive us, he said, I need you to know I was wrong. I know that's not enough. But you deserve to hear it. I closed my eyes. There were no tears. No rage. Just stillness and a quiet kind of closure. Thank you, Dad, I replied softly. But I don't need an apology. I just need peace. That night, I went home and pulled the family photo album from the shelf. I didn't burn it. I didn't rip it apart. I simply placed it into a box, locked it, and stored it away on top of the wardrobe. That chapter was over. There was no reason to look back. The next morning, I booked a solo trip to Maine. A journey I had always dreamed of but had constantly delayed because of holiday dinners, expectations, and obligations I had never chosen for myself. This time I chose me. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their affection. And most of all, I didn't need their version of love to validate my place in the world. Because now I knew my worth had never depended on how they saw me. It had always been about how I learned to see myself. Family might be where you begin, but it isn't always where you find your home. True family is made up of the ones who see you clearly, treat you with kindness, and never make you beg for dignity. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away, not to escape, but to finally walk toward yourself. Nora's story reminds us that sharing a bloodline doesn't guarantee respect, understanding, or love. Sometimes the people you grew up trusting are the very ones you must leave behind to protect your heart. Growth doesn't come from being accepted. It begins the moment you choose yourself, even if it means walking away without an apology. Choosing your peace isn't selfish. It's brave. It's necessary. And it's yours. What did you think of Nora's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more real, emotional family stories.